These four players are under the most pressure to succeed in 2026, and the list paints an encouraging picture about the Horned Frog offense. Oh yeah, it's Locked On Horned Frogs. Play my music.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? I'm Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. We close out today's episode with a look at Jamel Johnson, who I believe is under pressure to prove he is not a flash in the pan. The other two players that are on this list, Dwyer, Taylor-Whitfield, paint an interesting picture of the pressure and expectations within the offense in 2026, along with the star of the show, Jaden Craig. And that's who we lead off today's episode with, because Jaden Craig is under the most pressure of anybody on this roster for one obvious reason, but also because he gets it from the fans, from the team, and from the scouts. So TCU football is currently in fall camp, and Steven Johnson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram been giving a lot of updates, so great follow on social media. He was talking about the scouts who are there, and he was asked for who? And he brought up four players that that scouts were there for at TCU practice: Jaden Craig, Dwyer, Taylor-Whitfield, and Jamel Johnson. I think we understand the correlation between the tweet and also today's episode, because the scouts at practice are what puts a spotlight, or what puts the heavy amount of pressure on these four players. I'm going to talk about not only what it means for the player, but then also what it means for the school. When I look at Jaden Craig, we've talked about it before. This is a massive win-win for TCU and Craig. But the thing about Craig is the way he wins in this situation and the way he wins in this equation just equals pressure. TCU wins because they got a veteran, and if it doesn't work out, it just doesn't work out. You move on. You got a guy like Adam Schobel, who's on the roster right now. He's going to have a year to play underneath Hoover. He'll have a year to play underneath Craig, and he'd be in perfect position to step into that role if you want him to, with a year in Gordon Samus's offense under his belt. It's really no way to lose because you're preparing for the future regardless. But you look at Craig, the pressure that's on him is to show that he is ready for this level of play. He played at Harvard and he tore it up. He had a great Harvard career. The problem is it was at Harvard, and naturally scouts are going to question, is it a product of where you played or just how you played? It's on it's on Craig to prove it's the latter. That's the pressure from the scouts. And that's why scouts show up, because they want to see this is a draft prospect. I could easily see Craig being a mid-round pick in 2027. I could easily see, I'm not going to say easily on this one, but I could see Craig tearing it up and maybe even elevating into a top 50 overall pick. That's not crazy if he plays how he played at Harvard. And it's not going to be so much about stats with him. It's going to be about watching the film and seeing how you perform. But the fact that scouts are present to watch Craig in practice, that shows a level of importance, one that we already knew. So it's more so a confirmation of this level of importance. When you're talking about from the fans, everybody wants Josh Hoover to be replaced by Jaden Craig, specifically in the turnover department. Obviously, he's going to be on the field. Josh Hoover's not the quarterback anymore. Obviously, he's being replaced by Jaden Craig, and I don't think it was specific to him. But the thing is, everybody wants Hoover's turnover numbers to be replaced by Craig's. That's the number one thing we're looking for. The number two thing we're looking for is how can you perform in the big moments? And I can tell you right now, if he performs in the big moments, everybody's going to champion him. And they should, because performing in the big moments should be championed. But they'll champion him in relation to Hoover. If he fails to perform in the big moments, they will question him and relate him back to Hoover. So it's just kind of a two specific things we're looking for. That's the funniest thing about the Craig hype, is that the Craig hype, and I've said it before, I try to make sure that I articulate how much of a quality player that Craig is. I like to talk about how his decision making is really, really good. I like to talk about how his legs should bring a new dynamic to this offense. These are aspects I try to make sure that I highlight as much as possible. But a lot of times what you're going to hear and how he'll be remembered, not how he'll be remembered, but how he'll be discussed throughout the season and possibly remembered, will be in relation to who his predecessor was. There are so many people, and I think Sonny Dykes isn't a part of this group, but he's highlighted these things as well. Dykes has highlighted we need to protect the football. So when it comes to Jaden Craig and how we view him, it will be, do you protect the football? Do you show up in the fourth quarter? Two things the man before you did not do well enough to our liking. Are you able to rectify those mistakes? We know that everybody believes you'll be able to be a safe and secure quarterback, but will you also be a big time quarterback? I don't need you to throw 300 and 400 yards if you can give me the game winning drive with 2 minutes left on the clock. I don't need you to throw for 4 touchdowns if you can give me a touchdown in the fourth quarter in the last 5 minutes. It's about moments and it's about security when it comes to Jaden Craig. So there's so much pressure on him. And I actually want to add a fourth dimension here. I talked about the scouts and the idea of how much he can raise his draft stock. I've talked about the fans and the comparison from a ball security and big time moment standpoint. I'm going to get to the team in a second, but it's also the pressure of his own because he's betting on himself. Craig is betting on himself in a way that this is the only shot that he has to rise to the occasion. That's it. There's no, okay, well, if I don't perform, great, but I'm good at TCU, I have another year to stack on top of it. The stock that you went into the 2026 draft, though he didn't enter, the stock that he had going into the 2026 draft is kind of like a baseline. And the job is to not stay even. It's for sure to avoid dipping, but it's not to stay even either. It's to have a high peak. It's to have more of a peak than a hill, right? Like you want an actual mountain. You want to rise. You want to rise in this situation because you understand you only got 13, 14, 15, however many amount of games TCU plays in this season to elevate your stock. And then afterwards, you have to go into the 2027 season, or excuse me, 2027 draft. You have to go into that with whatever the product of this season is. And there's a pressure on yourself because you're banking on the fact that I can perform on this level. And I didn't go G5, right? Like he could have went to a G5, G6 school, and no diss to any of those schools. It's just not looked at as the pinnacle of competition, not by me or anybody. Talking about the scouts, it's not viewed as the pinnacle of competition, nor is it close to the pinnacle of competition. Okay. It has a weight. There's a weight involved there. So lastly, when it comes to the team, at the end of the day, the most pressure is always going to weigh on the quarterback. This segment, this episode was produced and it came to my mind because of the scout aspect. But let's say scouts never were here, and I still had to tell you who were the most pressured players on TCU football roster right now. Jaden Craig would start this show. Because any conversation that quarterbacks are in, 9 times out of 10, they are the center of those conversations. When you're talking about what a player could mean to a squad, there is no player that is more important. This time I'll say 8 times out of 10. I'm a probability guy. 8 times out of 10, there's not a player more important than the quarterback. Let's look at the Tennessee Titans from, this had to be like about 5 years ago. I think it might have been more than that. But I'm talking peak MVP level Derrick Henry with Ryan Tannehill. Derrick Henry was an absolute monster. There was no question who the best player on that team was. He was an absolute beast. But the reason they weren't able to get over the hump, or a big reason on why they weren't able to get over the hump, is they didn't have the quarterback play. So I say that to say, even when you have studs, even when you have stars all over your team, it all comes back to the quarterback. Can the quarterback perform? And that's going to be the, I would say, tipping point. That's going to be the deciding factor. And now that's Jaden Craig. So he's under pressure from himself. He's under pressure with the scouts to prove I'm not just a product of Harvard. We can blend those together if you want. He's under pressure from the fans because everybody knows exactly what they want to see from him. It's not just a generic, are you a good quarterback? It's, are you good in these categories? And then lastly, from the team, because everybody could be good. But if your quarterback isn't, A, it's going to limit everybody around him, and B, is going to limit your team. But speaking of everybody being around him being good, the idea that Jordan Dwyer and Ben Taylor-Whitfield are players to watch is an affirming statement for the future of TCU football in 2026 on the offensive side of the ball. Let's get into it a little deeper as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by KALSHI. Before the season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions. Who wins the division? Who makes the playoffs? Who's lifting the trophy at the end of the season? On KALSHI, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade these predictions in a live market. Listen, everybody wants to know, will the Cowboys make the playoffs? The easiest way to do that and most surefire way to do that is to win the division. So can the Cowboys win the NFC East? Right now, they're trading at 35% to win the division, meaning an $100 trade would pay out to $283.11 if they win the division. On KALSHI, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position, trade the draft pick, the game, and more on KALSHI. Download the KALSHI app and use code LOCKEDON to get up to $500 in bonus credits when you trade $25. That's KALSHI, KALSHI. Trade on anything. Today's episode is also brought to you by Poncho. You see what I got on. You see, I know you like it. I like it too. And I was amazed by just how quickly this thing dries off. I'm running around all day sweating because I live in Texas. It's hot. It's hot in Texas. I come back in the house for a little bit and it dries off. It's lightweight. It feels like I'm wearing nothing. I love this material. And it tells me I could go out, hit the grill, flip a couple of burgers, flip some chicken, do what I got to do on the grill, and then come back in for a TCU game at 11, at 2:30, right? Like, this is what I think about when I'm wearing this. That's how I feel, and that's how you would feel too. You didn't think you was a grill master till you put on Poncho. Let me tell you about it, because if you're like me, you need something to wear every single day, every single game as we go through the season. So go to ponchooutdoors.com/lockedon and enter your email for $10 off and free shipping on your first order. That's PONCHO outdoors.com/lockedon. Head there, drop in your email and get $10 off and free shipping. And once you try one, you'll get why I have a closet full of them. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day and making us the #1 sports podcast network in the country. Listen, TCU's offensive ceiling is sky high, and I believe the amount of offensive players that TCU had that's being viewed by scouts is proof of it. We have Jaden Craig, who we just talked about it in depth. So I'm going to try to keep his part of this conversation relatively limited. Jordan Dwyer, and then also Ben Taylor-Whitfield. That's just to strip names away. That's a quarterback, a wide receiver, and a left tackle. That's the 3 most important positions on a team, generically speaking. Obviously, the best players, they tend to hold more weight, right? If you have a star tight end, Travis Kelce is one of the most important players on the Kansas City Chiefs, even though he doesn't play a premier position. But in this case, you don't have to worry about weight. You don't have to worry about value because you have Ben Taylor-Whitfield at left tackle. You have Jordan Dwyer at wide receiver, and you have Jaden Craig at quarterback. That's 3 premier positions. That's 3 players who are being viewed as NFL draft prospects and people that scouts want to get an early look at. Now, I have had some conversations with scouts. I've had some conversations with people who know people like secondhand information. I've had all of these conversations going to Shrine Bowls and things of that nature. Let me just say, we cannot underrate the value of being on the radar early. because I think a lot of people view it as, oh, if you have a really good senior year, that's all you need and your draft stock will soar. Not necessarily. I think that is a bit of a fallacy. The truth is, you want to already be on the radar. Otherwise, you need a great senior season. A really good senior season could have people wondering, well, where was this at your first 3 seasons? They may wonder if you're a flash in the pan. We'll get back to that when it comes to Jamel Johnson in segment 3. But the idea of just go have a good senior season, no. If you're already on someone's radar, that means they're watching you all throughout the senior season. They don't have to go back and say, oh, let's go make sure we look at game 4 for this guy. They were already looking at you. Game 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think Jordan Dwyer is maybe the most interesting. I think he may be the most interesting because when you look at his career trajectory, it's a little odd. It's a little odd. It doesn't scream, I am a huge draft prospect just yet, but it does scream that he'll be able to make a lot of noise as the number 1 option at TCU. So let's just go through what he's been able to do. And then we're also going to look at the pressure aspect. This isn't fading away, but I think when just viewing the idea of what this means for the offense, well, that means people have an eye on Craig, Dwyer, and Taylor-Whitfield. So the premise, or at least the expectation should be that these are big-time players for TCU. Jordan Dwyer, in his first year, 12 catches, 136 yards. 2 touchdowns, though. 2023, 19 catches, 323 yards, 4 touchdowns. But what he got here, a 17-yard per catch clip. That's crazy. To have 17 yards per catch says that I am a deep ball threat. It means I'm able to stretch the field. That shows a trait, even if it doesn't equate to high-level production, just 323 yards. Also pretty good touchdown rate, by the way. 4 touchdowns on 19 catches. That's about a touchdown catch every 5 receptions. But his third year at Idaho, this is at Idaho, so this is a G6 level competition. He has 78 catches, 1,192 yards, 15.3 per clip. Once again, a really good rate. And he has 12 touchdown catches. Once again, a really good touchdown to reception percentage. That's a little bit over 1 touchdown catch every 6 receptions. So this is going really well. He gets to TCU, but he's under Eric McAllister here. So what you see is a player at Idaho who's working himself up. He has one explosive season. He has one season where he shows a high trait to be able to stretch the field. But then he gets to TCU, and it's like, what do I do now? What do I do now? And he gets up behind Eric McAllister, and he's one of the best number 2 receivers in the league. Like, he's one of the best number 2 receivers in the entire Big 12. So now that he's a number 1 receiver, everybody wants to know, what does that look like for Dwyer? And apparently the scouts agree. Apparently the scouts agree on what it could mean for him. There's a high expectation, and everything is going to elevate along with his position. So in some ways, I look at a natural pressure on him from a team perspective of just being the number 1 wide receiver. Like, it's not difficult. It's not complicated, right? You need Jordan Dwyer to come in and be one of the best guys. And the fact that scouts are already looking at him shows some sort of optimism that he can reach that from some source. I would even argue the most important source, right? Like, there's not too many ways to indicate how your players are viewed outside of the building. And honestly, it doesn't matter that much. But from a fan perspective, from an analyst perspective, it does add some legitimacy to the player. So you have All-Americans, you have positional award watch list. Those type of watch lists are great. All conference watch list, all of that is great. The draft is another thing, though, right? Like, it's not a bunch of, and Dwyer's not the most traitsy player. He's a really good player, but he's not a traitsy player. Anyway, next step is to look at Ben Taylor-Whitfield, but we're going to do that on the other side of the break. So we're going to combine both Ben Taylor-Whitfield and Jamel Johnson in segment 3 as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. I'm already talking with my friend about, all right, man, what section are we going to sit in? How can we find the best deal? He asked me where I want to get the tickets from. I almost drove over to his house and smacked him. It's game time. Like now, that was the worst question you could have asked. Where we want to sit? Valid. When do we want to buy them? Valid. Where do we buy them? It's always game time. I don't care if I'm going to football games, basketball games, soccer games, baseball games. I don't care if I'm going to the circus, and I bring it up because I legitimately went to the circus and got tickets from Game Time. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. I wish I were in your position where I could get $20 off by using the code Locked On, but I been did that. Been told my friend to do it too. Luckily, this is the first time I'm going somewhere with this particular friend, so he can use Locked On, be like him, and then you'll become like me because I'm always on Game Time no matter where or what time I need it. It could be last minute. I could be somewhere new and just say, hey, what's going on around this local area? Game Time has always been here for me, and they do all-in pricing, so those hidden fees don't hit you at the last minute. I don't play by no hidden fees. That makes me mad. Game Time makes me happy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On to get $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. We're going to continue our conversation about how the offensive ceiling is high, but then also briefly get into Jamel Johnson's pressure as well. Because I think he was the easiest one to predict that them being the scouts, were there for Jamel. But when it comes to Taylor-Whitfield, you have the quarterback that people say, we're really interested to see what his ceiling is. We think it could be high. That's great for the offense. We have the wide receiver who is stepping into a bigger role. He was a star at Idaho, came to TCU, was one of the best number 2 receivers in the conference because you had the number 1 receiver in the conference opposite of him. Now that guy's gone, can Jordan Dwyer just become the number 1 wide receiver in the Big 12? Questions. All right, Taylor-Whitfield. I wish that we could have got a second team all Big 12 preseason squad, but we didn't. We didn't, because I would really be interested to see if Taylor-Whitfield made that list. We won't know. Why stress over it? What I can tell you is with scouts coming to look at Taylor-Whitfield, it's a perfect time to kind of bring up the pressure he's under from a team perspective to keep Craig clean, but also to highlight how much he improved after moving to left tackle. When you go from right tackle to left tackle, the stats and what he did, they show a big difference. He did have some struggles, of course, right? It didn't all of a sudden snap and become perfect. He has to work on not allowing as many hurries. That's where most of his pressures come from. And he had his worst games kind of late. That Iowa State game comes to mind. He had 5 pressures in that game, 3 hurries in that game. That was a season high. Then he had 2 the next game, 2 the next game, 1, then 2 again. So, yeah, we definitely have to work on that. It seemed like the hurries picked up late in the season. But he didn't let Hoover get hit once he got to left tackle. He had 3 quarterback hits allowed in the first 3 weeks, by the way. Not even just his whole time at right tackle, but his first 3 weeks. And then he only had 2 the rest of the season, and both of those came in the Iowa State game. It was a rough matchup for him. But other than that, no quarterback hits allowed. He allowed 3 sacks at right tackle. He allowed no sacks at left tackle. And just to put this in perspective, he played right tackle for 5 games. He played left tackle for 8. So he played 3 more games at left tackle than he did at right tackle. So just when you see the slants of the numbers, I think it makes it even more impressive. But there's pressure on him. And now it's like, okay, people have eyes on him to see what he could be. He could be one of the best players in this conference in 2026. Then lastly, that's this offensive ceiling, right? You have a guy who could be a stud at protection, a guy who could be a stud catching the ball, and a guy who could be a stud throwing the rock. I know we talk a lot about running the football, but doggone it, that sounds like a recipe for an explosive passing attack. And please don't forget, Joe Fagnano did have more than just on his resume than just 1 interception or no interceptions, right? Like he had much more on his resume than that. He was a very prolific passer as well. That's important to note. Now, I'm going to close out with Jamel Johnson, and I think this goes without saying. Johnson, I've said it before, best player on his team. The pressure is to show you're not a flash in the pan. And I'm going to keep it brief so that we can bring this up on another day. But the pressure for Jamel Johnson is to show you're not a fluke, specifically in the pass coverage department. And I do wonder, players like Johnson don't get drafted high often. I say the same thing about Craig and Harvard. Harvard quarterbacks are not going to get drafted high often. FCS quarterbacks are not going to get drafted high often. There's a kid out there at Alabama State, Andrew Body. Fantastic, if you ask me. The draft stock, questionable, plays on the FCS. You got some guys like Carson Wentz and Bryce Lance, not Bryce Lance, Trey Lance. Bryce Lance is his brother. But Trey Lance, yeah, they're early picks out of North Dakota State. North Dakota State plays by a different ball game. They don't play by the same rules, okay? All right, I'm just telling you, FCS quarterbacks can be hard to be drafted early. So I felt that way about Craig at Harvard. Needed to come to TCU. Jamel Johnson is a run-stopping safety in a league that prioritizes stopping the pass. So it's on him to now prove that the 5 interceptions he had last year were not a flash in the pan, to show that his ability to impact the passing game specifically was not a fluke. It doesn't have to look like 5 interceptions. It doesn't. But it does have to look like getting your hand on some more passes, even if they don't turn into interceptions. He's been a 3-pass deflection guy. We want to see the instincts. We want to see the reading, the analysis, all of the things that led to his ability to get to the football, whether it was good timing, whether it was knowing where to be. Sometimes, I think it was one in particular on the left sideline that he was just in coverage on. Some of these other ones where he was over the top and he broke on it. But this one, I think he was just in coverage on the left side. Maybe it was a wheel route by a running back or something. I don't remember exactly the play, but I do pretty strongly remember it being on the left sideline. He just went up and got it. You have to show you can do that, because at the end of the day, if you're just a run stopper, unless you're the best run stopping safety in the draft, you might not hear your name called in the first 2 days. Might be a 4th round pick, because your skill set just isn't necessarily one that everybody's clamoring for. That's the pressure. The pressure is always for Jamel. I know what Jamel can do as a run stopper. The pressure comes in what can he be in pass coverage? Can he be who he was in 2025? If he is, he might get drafted before Bud did. He's genuinely that talented. If Jamel Johnson shows that he can once again impact the pass game just as well, or maybe slightly less as good as he impacts the running game, this guy is a day 1, day 2 pick, because I think he is genuinely that talented. And I think he's going to be an impact player for TCU once again. From a team perspective, you need him to be an impact player because you don't have enough certified guys on that squad. You just don't. You have a lot of question marks. Even guys I have the utmost belief in, like Max Carroll, is still a question mark. But Jamel Johnson is the sure thing on that squad, and he needs to perform like it as all of the new pieces start to come together and form the nucleus that is Andy Avalos' defense. Now, we'll be back tomorrow. I'm still on the fence on whether or not I'm going to do a Would You Rather. We'll have to see on that. But we may come back with that on Wednesday. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.